Hey guys, Chris here. Sometimes when you go camping, things go wrong. I got a story about a family that goes camping in the Sierra Nevada, and things go so terribly wrong, it becomes the most frightening moment of their life. That's next. All right, you guys, we are along the Feather River here in the Plumas National Forest, and this is the middle fork of the Feather River. I've been here before. Great country up here, and today's beer is called Belching Beaver. Must be the honey blonde ale. It's even got a beaver in a bee suit, which is pretty rare to have a beer with a beaver and a bear bee suit. All brewed, ale brewed with honey, and this says it is damn good times. So gonna give that a taste. There we go. A little sudsy. There we go. Oh yeah. Little honey action going there. Definitely blonde ale going on. Oh, little making a mess, and I'm having fun doing it. So, all right, let's give it a shot. Ooh, that is I can taste the honey, but it's not overpowering in the finish. It's not super sweet, but there's definitely a honey type taste to it. Little bitter aftertaste, kind of a dry finish, almost like champagne. And but that is really pleasant to taste. Not heavy duty. It is a 5.5 ABV on that, and that is the must be the honey blonde ale. So there you go. Cheers. Thanks to AG1 for sponsoring today's video. Now, I started the year wanting to focus more on my health, going to the gym more, hiking consistently, and for my nutrition, I recently started drinking AG1. With just one scoop, there we go, it's a new part of my morning routine. It's nice to know I've done something good for my body, and it really sets me up for the whole day. With my health goals, here are some of the benefits I get from AG1. The B vitamins in AG1 support energy without the caffeine crash that I get from coffee. AG1 provides the nutrients to support the nervous system and a healthy mood. AG1 has the vitamins and minerals you need the way you need them by ensuring they power cells for daily function. I am looking forward to the long-term benefits from drinking AG1. If you want to try it out, go to drinkag1.com Basecamp Chris or scan the QR code and subscribe and save $20 off your first subscription to AG1. Thanks to AG1 for sponsoring today's video. So this story takes place not too far from where I live. Reno, Carson City, and then south of there on the 395 Great Highway parallels the east side of the Sierra Nevada. I love this route. You feel like you're on vacation instantly when you get on this route and you're heading down the Sierra Nevada. Sierra Nevada is a very large mountain range, over 400 miles long. And as you go down south from where I live, go to this small town called Bridgeport, California. Sweet little town, 500 plus people at the base of the Sierra. Go a little farther past that, and there's this Dunderberg Peak, and then to the south of there is Virginia Lakes, and there's a 6-mile long dirt road that goes up into the Inyo National Forest, 1.9 million acres of wild East Slope Sierra Nevada mountains. It goes from around Bridgeport, past Yosemite, all the way down to Sequoia National Park on the east side down there. Great country, high peaks, rugged, wild, great backpacking and fishing. in fall of 2015, Jerry, his wife Beth, his son, daughter-in-law, and 3 grandkids, they took their fifth wheel and they did this. What they do every year is a hunting, camping, family trip. And him and his son go out hunting, and everyone else is at the campsite, and they really have a nice time doing this. And they've been doing this for years. They just love it, and it's a nice time for them to all be together. This particular year, 2015, late September, they went up this dirt road, 6 miles to this Virginia Lakes area, beautiful country up there. And the Hoover Wilderness is just beyond that, spectacular country. And they found their spot. It wasn't in the designated campground, but they have this spot where they pull into the forest just off of this dirt road, and they set up their camp. Got the fifth wheel organized, leveled, got the coolers out, lawn furniture, got the campfire going. And right then, his wife, Beth, walks up to Jerry, and she says, "Hey, honey, I just want to mention something. I got a really bad feeling about this area, this location. Very uneasy feeling. I really don't know what we can do with it, but I just wanted to let you know that." And Jerry listened, and he said, "Okay, well, thank you. I guess we'll be careful, we'll be cautious." And he didn't know what else to do with that. It was late in the day, and they'd already everything set up and ready to go for their long weekend. There was a Friday through a Tuesday hunting, camping, and so he just kind of let it go and just keep his eye on things. So they had a nice dinner. Kids were playing, the 3 grandkids were playing around the camper, and they had a campfire, and then they went to sleep. Next morning, Jerry and his son got up really early, and they started hunting. They did their route through the valley there, and then as it goes around the other side of Dunderberg Peak, it kind of flanks off down towards the highway, and this is where all these aspen trees are, these aspen groves. It's quite beautiful in the fall if you can catch the colors right. It's amazing because it just slopes up to these peaks, and they were hunting in this area. I don't know their route, and they noticed that they saw quite a few deer, a lot of deer, and the deer were not spooked by their presence. They remembered that after the fact. And they also remembered while they were there this particular weekend, September 2015, they didn't see any other cars go up or down this dirt road. And later they thought that was a little odd. They were very secluded by themselves, and just made a note of that after the fact. They went hunting again on Sunday. Didn't see what they wanted. They were looking for a pretty good sized buck. And then they hit Monday, and they finally got their first deer. Field dressed it on the spot, and then brought the carcass about 75 yards away from camp, finished cleaning it there, and then they left the carcass about 50 yards away from the campsite. Put the meat in the cooler, put the cooler under the camper, and that night they had their dinner, had their campfire as usual, and then they all went to bed. About between 1 and 2 a.m., Jerry's wife heard on the rooftop of the camper something land on the top of the camper, fifth wheel. Pretty good size one. Got her attention. She actually sat up. She's sitting next to Jerry, and Jerry's a sound sleeper. He's crashed out, especially after a long day of hunting, hiking through the forest, camping. And so he's just out. He's out like a light. He doesn't hear this. And Beth is listening, and she hears another, it sounded like a rock this time, hitting the roof. She looks across the fifth wheel, and she can see her daughter-in-law in the bed at the other end, and she sat up, and they're both listening, and now they can hear a succession of, sounded like rocks hitting the top of their fifth wheel. And then the son sits up, and he can hear this as well. And then Beth slips out of bed, and she stands up, and she walks to the middle of this camper, and she's standing there listening because she wants to get kind of a better sense all around what's going on. The daughter-in-law, she stands up, and she joins her right in the middle of the fifth wheel. And then the son stands up as well, and they're listening, and the rock throwing seemed to have stopped, and they're just going, and they didn't say anything. They were all feeling this fear and this uncertainty about what is going on. Jerry's sound asleep. And then they hear this loud crack. Something like took a baseball bat to the side of a tree trunk. A tree knock. This is Bigfoot behavior, Bigfoot intimidation behavior. And then they heard a series of these tree knocks for several minutes, 7, 8, 10 minutes. At this point, the 3 grandchildren sat up and were listening to this as well, and they could see the adults were standing in the middle of the camper, and they were very quiet, and they had this look of fear in their face, and the kids were very concerned. So the 2 youngest ones went over to the mom, the daughter-in-law, and put their arms around them, and they were starting to cry. They were feeling very afraid because the parents felt uncertain. They could just tell. They're all standing there except for Jerry in the middle of the camper listening, and then on the side of the camper, fifth wheel, RV, whatever you want to call it, they hear this thud. Just this thud sound. Didn't know if it was a slap or something thrown at it, but this thud, and the camper did a slight rock like this. And they're all on red alert, waiting what's going to happen next. Then they hear, it sounds like the cooler that's under the fifth wheel starts to drag. It's like it's dragging across the ground. At this point, Jerry woke up, and he could hear this moving, dragging sound under the camper, and his first thought was, oh my gosh, there's a bear, got the cooler, and is dragging it out from underneath, and it's going to flip it over and get the deer meat. And he was totally unaware of what had transpired just minutes before. So he gets out of bed, and he's half asleep. He stands up, and then he sees everyone else standing there in the dark. And immediately he's puzzled by what he sees. He's like, "What? Why is everyone up?" And then he says out loud, "What's going on?" Nobody said a word. And he said, "I think the bear is trying to get the cooler. I got to go outside and check on the cooler and scare this bear off if I have to." And right then, his son just put his hand up like this and went, like, "Shut up, be quiet, listen, there's something going on." And then Jerry figured it out. Okay. And he stood there with them, and then they all heard this low growl just outside the fifth wheel on the tree side, the forest side, opposite of obviously where the truck was and the main campsite was, but on the back side of they hear this low growl. And Jerry feels this, like, okay, and he didn't hear everything else prior, so he's thinking, okay, there's a bear. And so he's thinking, I got to go out and check on this cooler. And then they heard, this is crazy because this is like all the Bigfoot intimidation behavior all in one night. they heard this blood-curdling scream coming from towards the front of the RV, fifth wheel, off that direction, this blood-curdling scream. And then they heard another one in the opposite direction, backside of the fifth wheel, and they heard 5 total of these screams. Crazy. And they're just wide-eyed and just standing there hunkered in the middle of this camper, and Jerry's still thinking, I gotta go check on this cooler. So he says to his son, I need to go and check on the cooler. Can you come with me? And his son refused. He says, no way, no way. And so Jerry grabs the flashlight, handheld spotlight, opens up the door and steps out. And then he realizes, obviously it's dark outside. There was a moon. It was brightly lit, but it was in the forest, so it's still patchy light coming through. And then he realizes he couldn't just go around to the side of the camper to look at the cooler, because he'd have to turn his back on everything and then crouch down and look. And so he's like, okay, I got to scan the area, clear the area first with the light, make sure there's nothing there standing there, gonna grab me or something or attack. And so he shines this light into the forest, which is about 25 feet away, the tree line. And he sees, as he's shining the light up, these 2 red eyes, glowing red eyes, that look like they're up in a tree, about 8 feet up in a tree. And he said, this is really pretty wild, that before the light hit the eyes, the eyes were already glowing. That's what he said. But he thought still, maybe it's an animal, a raccoon, up on a tree branch. And so he looks at this tree trunk, and he doesn't see any tree branches, limbs coming out for at least 25 feet. And I'm in a pine forest right now, and some of these, the main limbs don't start until way up. And then he realizes that these eyes were, here's the tree trunk, and then this eyes came out like that, looked at him, and then he hit it with the light, then it went back like that. And he realized that whatever this was standing behind the tree about 8 feet up where the eyes were. Immediately felt this, he was startled, turned to retreat back into the fifth wheel, does a last swing through around the camper with the light to check the cooler, and he saw the cooler, and then he went right back in. They all stood in the camper, every one of them, for the next 45 minutes, almost an hour, just waiting, listening, not knowing what was going to happen. Nothing else happened. And then after about an hour, they slowly, one by one, got back into their beds, and they're just waiting and listening some more. And then I don't know if they all started falling asleep, but they got through the night. Nothing else happened. The next morning, Jerry got up first, and then he told his son, he asked his son, can you come out with me? But let's let everyone else stay in the fifth wheel here. I want to do a scan, walk around, check out, see if anything's moved, missing, whatever. So his son said, yeah, I can come with. And so they went out the camper, 6:45, 7 in the morning. Jerry starts walking around this fifth wheel, and he gets to the back of the fifth wheel, and he remembered that the kids had been playing with some pretty good sized rocks, softball sized rocks, and they stacked them. There was 8 of them that they stacked off the back end of the fifth wheel, and these rocks were gone. And he remembered seeing this, and they were gone. He was like, okay, and he keeps going, goes around, and he's walking through the campsite, and then he finds footprints in the dirt. It's not very dirt. It's dust. It's almost like a dust because it was dry. But he took photos. That's good. He took footprints. He took photos of these footprints and really got some interesting shots. This was 2015. I don't know what the cameras were like back then, but he got some pretty good shots. Here's one of them. And then I did in Photoshop this overlay, and I drew around the shape so you could kind of see the whole footprint where it was placed, because I studied these up close and I could see the actual heel, the ball of the foot, and then the toes. And I don't know if it's evident as well as I've seen it. I saw it. And so he got some good shots of these footprints, and even the toes are kind of crooked, and the big fat toe, and the just really odd looking footprints that he found. And so he was really starting to think of, okay, this might be Bigfoot or Sasquatch. Oh my gosh. And then they keep going around doing this, kind of moving out from the campsite, moving into the forest, looking for anything else, any other evidence, broken trees, more footprints, just anything. And also he did notice that the camp furniture, the lawn chairs weren't moved. Nothing else was moved. The cooler had been like pivoted and dragged a little bit. And then he went out to where this carcass was, about 50 or so yards. And right next to this carcass, he saw this tree about this big around, and it was broke over like this. And they heard, amongst all of this sounds of the blood-curdling screams, the tree knocks, growl, they heard movement in the forest as well, and they heard something that sounded like some tree breaks, but it was just, amongst everything else, it just almost blended in. There was just a lot going on. Jerry came back in. He told everybody else what he'd seen, what him and his son saw. And they were relieved to have gotten through the night. They were all ready to go that day. It was Tuesday. They were going to leave that day anyways. So they left. And I don't know if they'd been back there, but Jerry said at that time, he was 58 years old. He's been hunting, camping, experiencing the outdoors since he was a kid. Vast amounts of experience. And coming to the Eastern Sierra, been doing that for decades, and he'd never seen or heard anything like this before. All those trips, all that time, nothing. And he said, this was the most frightening experience I've ever had in my life, just camping with my family at this location, Virginia Lakes, in the Inyo National Forest in 2015. So that is our story about this family doing their little camping hunting trip. And pretty wild. It's like they had everything that you could imagine. The tree knocks, tree breaks, growls, howls, screams, rocks, footprints. It's like, oh my God. All in one night and morning. So pretty crazy. So, all right, you guys. More stories coming. This is a great time of year. It's April. I love April. Oh my gosh. April and May's coming. We're going to even get more sunlight. It's going to get warmer, nicer. So if you guys like what I do, like and subscribe. Always appreciate that. And we will see you on the next one. As always, keep hiking.